Okay, this module is about intelligence theorists and the pioneers. So let's do it. The first intelligence theorist is Charles Spearman, and he came up with general intelligence, or G factor. And he talked about primary mental abilities being like word fluency, verbal comprehension, spatial ability, perceptual speed, verbal ability, numerical ability. And that's how he kind of labeled what is intelligence. So remember, G factor and S factor. S factor is specific skills. G factor is generalized intelligence. The CHC, or the Cattell-Horn-Carroll intelligence theory, talks about fluid intelligence versus crystallized intelligence. And the theory basically states that our intelligence is based on generalized intelligence, the G factor, as well as specific abilities, which is the S factor. They talk specifically about fluid versus crystallized. Remember, fluid intelligence, you lose that as you age, right? So think about fluid, like you pick up fluid with your hands, it falls through the cracks of your fingers. Fluid intelligence leaves you with age, but crystallized intelligence, you grab a crystal in your hands, that doesn't go anywhere, right? Crystallized intelligence stays with you, and it's like the wisdom that comes with age. So remember, fluid versus crystallized, and that was brought to you by Raymond Cattell. But the Cattell-Horn-Carroll intelligence theory basically talks about that it's based on G as well as specific abilities bridged by the general intelligence theory and the specific intelligence theory by Spearman. This is one of my favorite intelligence theories. It's the theories of multiple intelligences, and this is by Howard Gardner. He's from Harvard, and he talks about 8 independent different kinds of intelligences. And in the picture right above my head with all the colors, those are the different kinds of intelligences. So take a look at that. It's not just for decoration. It's in your notes, and it's there for you to learn the different kinds of intelligences. So check that out, and that's Howard Gardner. Savant syndrome is a condition in which a person otherwise might have limited mental abilities, but they have exceptional specific skills. And so here in this slide and in the videos I showed in class, I gave you an example of Savant syndrome. This is Robert Sternberg's 3 intelligence theory, and it makes a lot of sense. It's also called triad theory. And so you have the analytical intelligence, that's your kind of like your academic problem-solving intelligence. Then you got your practical intelligence, that's kind of like your street smarts. And then you have creative intelligence, imagination, innovative problem-solving, and you put those 3 together and you have a pretty intelligent person. So it's called triad theory, and those are the 3 aspects of what he feels are high intelligence. In this slide, there's 2 major things you should know: the word grit and also what is emotional intelligence. There is something called an EIQ, and that's an emotional IQ. So emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive, understand, and even manage the use of emotions to your, the best of your ability. And that's emotional intelligence. It's about perceiving and understanding, managing emotions, and using emotions properly. Now, grit is kind of like past the emotion theory. There is such a thing as having great work ethic, and that's kind of like grit. It's like a passion, a perseverance when you're pursuing your goals. And having grit is really important because it makes you work harder, it makes you strive to do your best, and sometimes that could actually supersede the talent that intelligence might give. Now here we have L.L. Thurstone, Louis Leon Thurstone, and he talked about primary mental abilities being like your numerical talent, your verbal fluency, the ability for you to see spatial things and imagine spatial things, your general memory, verbal fluency, your intuition, your perceptual speed. All of these things are part of your primary mental abilities according to L.L. Thurstone. Okay, so this chart is in your notes as well, and it's not decoration. Study this chart. It's comparing the different theories of intelligence. It's a good kind of like one-stop shop place to go look and study your different theories. Okay, so intelligence testing is a method for assessing an individual's mental aptitude and allows you to compare it with other people, and it gives it a numerical value. It's quantitative data that you can easily compare. That's what an IQ test is. Now, there's different kinds of tests. There's achievement test versus aptitude test. Now, your AP exam, that's an achievement test. It's a test designed to assess how much you've learned about psychology all year long. But aptitude is a little different. It's a test designed to predict a person's future performance. And aptitude, that's your capacity to learn something new, how fast you can acquire it. Now, Sir Francis Galton, another pioneer in this area, he basically said that intelligence runs in the family. It comes from like long lines of genetics, and that might be true to a certain extent. But what kind of role does the environment play with intelligence? That's what Sir Francis Galton did not address. So here you have a couple of important things on this slide. What is an IQ test? The difference between achievement and aptitude, and who is Sir Francis Galton? All right, we have two pioneers in this slide. Do you know that the IQ test of today is very reminiscent, almost identical to the original that was invented in the 50s by Albert Binet? Yes. And so Albert Binet invented this IQ test, and he never wanted it to be a way for people to be discriminated against, but unfortunately, that's how it was used. When people were given the test, they were told, well, you know what, you're not going to really do well in school, so we're not going to admit you into school. And that's not what he imagined this IQ test to be. So in a way, it was very unfortunate that that happened. Now, the second pioneer on this slide is Louis Turnman. He wanted to measure innate intelligence by using the Stanford Binet test, making this information quantifiable so you can compare it to others. Now, you might have heard of the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or the WAIS. Have you ever heard of that? It's pretty popular. It's used today. It was designed by David Wechsler. And this particular test, it has different things, different aspects to it. Like, it'll ask you about similarities, like what ways are a cotton ball and wool alike. It'll ask you about vocabulary to test your articulation. Can you name these pictured objects, or can you define what is a guitar? Something else that's indicative of the WAIS is like block design, like visual and abstract processing, like using blocks in different ways and matching things. And the last thing is the letter number sequencing. They're going to repeat numbers in ascending order, then you have to place them in alpha order, and they also test your speed to which you can do these things. Back in the research chapter, we learned what is a good test. A good test has to have controls. There has to be some kind of standardization. It has to be both valid and reliable. And so this is what this slide is talking about. Standardization is defining a uniform testing procedure, having meaningful scores because of it, and having things standardized is very important, that you have these strict controls. Something else that's important is the normal bell curve. We've been talking about that since the research chapter at the beginning of these modules, right? The normal bell curve is going to describe the distribution of many physical and psychological attributes. Most scores are going to fall in the average, right? Like IQ, right? They all kind of center around that 100 mark, right? Most people score within 85 and 115, right? So they're kind of centering around the average. The normal bell curve shows us that. Now, here's something that I think young people really like, is the Flynn effect. Do you know that IQ scores rose 3 points per decade? That means, yes, that young people like you might be actually smarter than your ancestors, a couple generations back. I know you guys like the Flynn effect. Yeah, learn it, the Flynn effect. Okay, so it's really important to know IQ testing, are they reliable and are they valid? Well, remember that reliability means that when a person takes a test again, it's going to give us similar answers. It's going to give similar outcome. It's going to yield the same results. That's a good test. That's a reliable test. Now, content validity is the extent that the test samples the behavior that's of interest. So let's say you are taking your driver's test, right? Your driver's test is supposed to be a mini little test to show the people in charge, right, that you're going to be like this on the road. It's a small test that reflects your abilities out on the road. That's content validity, testing what's of interest. Now, construct validity is how much a test measures a concept or a trait. For example, if we're testing self-esteem, how do you know it's self-esteem that's being affected? So it's important that a test has proper construct validity. Another kind of validity is predictive validity. Now, predictive validity is kind of like the SATs, right? The SATs, when you take them, colleges look at that as a predictor of your performance at their university. So are your grades in high school, right? They look at your transcript from high school, and then they look at your SAT scores, and then they say, okay, is this person going to do well at our university? Because remember, universities, they want you to be there for the whole 4 years. They want that tuition money, right? So think about it. They're going to invest in people that they know they're going to enter school and then leave after the 4 years and graduate, right? And then maybe even stay for their master's or, beyond. So think about it. Those are predicting kinds of tests that predict an outcome, and they're usually pretty right. This is an interesting one. This pioneer that studied intelligence, his name is Ian Deary. And Ian Deary gathered up the IQ scores of kids in Scotland, and they had taken these IQ tests when they were young. He gathered them up again when they were, like 65 years later, and he gave them an IQ test again. And do you know that their IQ test was very much the same? That's reliability right there, right? The test is yielding the same results. But here's the cool part. What's interesting is the high IQ people, they were still around 65 years later. And then again, he gathered them up again when they were in their 90s. So think about it. They were in their 80s when they took the test the second time. When they took the test the third time, they were in their 90s. And it confirmed the remarkable stability of this test of the IQ. But even more interesting is the health, like the relatedness of brain health and physical health. So there's a couple of explanations that they give about this. Maybe intelligence facilitates more education, better jobs, and you're in a healthier environment, so you live longer. Maybe intelligence encourages healthy living, better diet, more exercise, and you live longer. Maybe prenatal events and early childhood illnesses can influence both intelligence and health. And a well-wired brain might actually kind of be correlated to a healthy body, and it might be evidenced here. Isn't that interesting? Ian Deary, the Scotland study with IQs over generations. So cool. Remember that heritability is the portion of variation among individuals in a group that we can attribute to genes. And so just remember that the most genetically similar people have the most similar intelligence scores as well. And this is a little chart that kind of elaborates on that. Well, in the previous slide, we saw the importance of heritability, but make no mistake, the environment also plays a very, very important role in your intelligence. Remember that deprivation can slow the brain, and this has been seen in, like, for example, foster care systems. It has been seen in cases of abuse where kids are born perfectly perfect in every way, but because of abuse or because of neglect or malnutrition, their brain development slows and they cognitively don't catch up to their peers. So remember that a poor environment condition can like one that accompanies poverty, for example, can depress cognitive performance. Yeah, I'm about to quote Mr. 305 right here. He talks about growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And growth mindset focuses on learning and growing rather than viewing abilities as fixed. And yeah, I'm going to quote him. He said, when you fail, embrace it, learn from it. Don't think that's going to hinder you from becoming whoever you want to become. I wake up every day telling the world, come on, baby, let's ride. What do you got for me? That's a quote from Pitbull in 2019. The fixed mindset is the view that intelligence, abilities, and talents are unchangeable, even with effort. And that's not very optimistic, right? So we want to be optimistic. We want to know that, yes, I can continue to grow and learn at any age, under any circumstance. And who controls it? I do. That's an internal locus of control. Remember that by Julian Rotter? If you don't remember that, I think you should review that. I think that was in a previous chapter. Internal locus of control. Pitbull definitely has one. In this part of the module, they talk about intelligence connected to achievement, talking about group differences and question biases. So go over the different important points about cultural awareness and intelligence. Remember I told you a while back that the word bias gets us into trouble? It really does. Biasing is never good with any kind of test or research. So read about biases with the IQ test as well. But remember that the goals for testing, according to Albert Binet's original goals, were for schools to recognize who could benefit from early intervention. Also, IQ scores weren't to be misinterpreted for someone's value or worth. That wasn't the intention of the design of that test. Also, he wanted the test to reflect only one aspect of a person's personal competence. Remember, overall, they say competence plus diligence, and that's that grit that we were talking about, equals accomplishment. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Competence, right? Your natural competence, but then you add diligence and grit to that, you get accomplishment. Anybody can do this. You just have to want it really bad. There was a few little snippets and documentaries I showed in class, but here are different YouTube videos that you can watch that help supplement the information in this chapter. And look, usually these videos are 30 minutes. This one was 16 minutes and we're done. Good job.